Welcome back to Anxiety Chats. Today we have another anonymous anxiety story.
We will be talking about burnout today, and quick disclaimer, there will be mentions of sick, so if that could be triggering to you, maybe skip this one and come back next time.
As always, if you would like to be involved with us at Anxiety Chats, you can send us your anonymous story through the link in our description.
Or you can come on the podcast to chat with us in person. Go to the description of wherever you're listening to this podcast. So, a few years ago, I was feeling pretty burnout from the student placement I was doing in my education degree. I remember walking to the train station after I had finished one day and a full blown panic attack started. Being at the train station and eventually on the train, having whole body shakes, nausea, and feeling like I had a tunnel vision. I ended up being sick on the train on my way home as well.
The panic attack lasted well into the train ride. The only thing that helped was going straight to bed in the dark for several hours once returning home. This story is important to me because it constantly serves as a reminder to check in with myself and the risk of pushing myself past my limits. I believe wholeheartedly in trying new things, testing your limits, etc., but I think it's also important to put your mental health as a priority when you can feel your anxiety is getting worse again. I used to think that the physical symptoms I experienced were embarrassing, but now I feel grateful that I had that experience. It showed me what can happen if I don't put myself first, and the value of having an anxiety plan during stressful seasons of my life. Now, this is an interesting discussion because we've been talking like just the two of us about burnout quite a lot recently and what that looks like to us. So it's kind of topical just in our personal lives, I think, as well.
I love how it can manifest different for other people. Like, she obviously got sick and, you know, it's like your body, and this is something my therapist was telling me, is your body tells you when something is wrong. And a lot of times we don't pay attention. You know, we think, oh, I'm just a bit tired, or I have a headache, or even the lack of appetite can be a sign. Or things like, for example, like when your hands feel numb or your legs feel numb, you know, your body talks to you when something is wrong, right? But we sometimes just ignore those things because we're in a hurry or because we have to meet a deadline, or sometimes it's even worse when we know something is wrong but we just like ignore it, you know. So I love, I mean, I don't love that she got sick, or he got sick, but I love how it manifests as different in different people. And if you think about it, there are so many of us, and I wonder what other symptoms do people have, other things that are outside the parameters of what it's like to be burnout,
100%. Like, I think anxiety, like, this is a form of anxiety, I think. And I think it can really, like, this physical symptoms can be so bizarre. Like, there can be things you would never, like itching, or, like just your body generally being run down. Like, you're more likely to get colds and flus and things like COVID when you're run down, I think. And interestingly, when this person said, like, that they believe in like pushing past your limits and things like that, but also it's really important to have your mental health in check, because I was literally just in therapy like 10 minutes before we started this call, and my therapist said there is literally no point in white knuckling, as in like just clenching yourself and being super, super anxious in a situation, because your body's probably not going to learn anything in that situation. It's like about pushing yourself to the point where this feels slightly uncomfortable so you can learn something new, but without being like, I'm going to put my body in the most anxious position it can possibly be in, and then it'll just have to learn to put up with it. That's not how bodies work. Like, we need to be really gentle, and I know that you experience burnout, Gabby.
Yeah, I love that. But see, that brings me back to what we were discussing before this call, is how, sometimes we know that we have to take care of our body, right? And our health. But also we know that, we don't have the same time that our parents or grandparents used to have, like this is something that my friend told me on the weekend, and when she was sharing her own story, and it's true. It made me really think about it. I came home and I was like, that's something that I didn't think about, Like, she was talking about how much how stressed she is, how tired, but also how important her job is and her other job.
Mm.
And she's trying to do this and that. She has this many expenses, and so she has to think about all those things. And then she said, it's crazy because my mom and dad say, oh, it's normal to work this hard, but when they tell me their stories about what they exactly used to do, or my grandparents, how it was, you know to be in the workforce for them, it was like they only had one job, they only stick to one thing
Mm.
usually, and it was like a very strict schedule. And outside of that, they didn't really have anything to worry about because there was no
Mm.
other factors, I don't know. And on top of that, the price of owning a home wasn't that expensive compared to what it is
Yeah.
now. So she's like, I have to work two jobs to be able to afford this condo that I want, and probably I'm not
Hmm.
gonna get it because I am just not able to meet all that money, to gather all that money. And I'm like, well, don't think about it, and try not to think too much about the fact that you have to pay for this. And she says something along the lines, well, I also want a home. My parents had a home when I
Mm.
was when they were like already in their 30s. I also worry about that. I don't have a commitment, and a child or marriage, but I do want my independence. So that was cool to talk about, because I thought, yeah, I think I heard it somewhere else too on a podcast. Is young people now, our generation, is like overworking themselves just to meet or catch up with those demands, that our parents or grandparents
Hmm.
met with no problem, or maybe it was a problem but
Yeah.
not as much as it is now, because we have to
Mm.
factor in the fact that there's competition, whatever you want to do, lawyer, medicine,
Hmm.
or even just being a creator. It's a competitive world. Like, it really, the competition
Yeah.
between among us is like so big. And on top of that, the economy is like not helping at all. I think there's an
No.
article that talks about how like a lot of millennials are not ever gonna be able to own a home because of how
Yeah.
expensive is getting. And then Gen Z is gonna
Hmm.
sort of follow that pattern. Like, we're gonna be renters. Not all of us, of course, but a lot of us are gonna be renters forever, because owning a home is like
Hmm.
stupid expensive. So I'm like, really, it has a lot to do with current time, our world as it is now.
Yeah.
So it's crazy for me to see
Mm.
to see it that way. It actually shocked me, and I mentioned it to my therapist, and she was like, yeah. And something that I didn't really think about too is how much young people suffer. What's it called? Eco anxiety. Like, we also worry about the planet, right? The environment, blah blah. So like, people, it seems like people in the past didn't worry about all those things, but now we worry about everything. Which is good,
100%.
but also it's like our mind is like this. It's big of emotions and thoughts. So it's quite
For
easy. I,
sure.
I totally see a burnout in the cards for a lot of people our age, or somewhere between 25 to 35. I see it happening.
Definitely. And also, I think it's important to remember, like, obviously, it's amazing that women are now in the workforce and stuff. But at one point, a woman's job was to take care of the home and the children and all those aspects. And then the man's job was to earn the money. And obviously, I don't agree with that.
Hmm.
I don't agree that women should have to be at home and that men should have to work and blah, blah, blah. But that, I think, there was somebody caring for, that's a full time job, caring for the home, caring for
Hmm.
yourself, caring for children. All of those things are that's kind of the self care stuff too. Like a woman would make sure a man was eating properly. Again, can't reiterate
Hmm.
enough how much I'm glad that it's not that way anymore. I'm not
Yeah,
suggesting
me
that we
too.
should go back that way. But like now it's, both people in a relationship have to work, and like you said, a lot of people are having to work two jobs, like there's a cost of living crisis. And it's also, I
Mm-hmm.
think, a huge massive privilege for somebody to, be experiencing burnout and then be able to take time off work or be able to, go on holiday. These are luxuries that a lot of people cannot do right now. So even talking about
Yeah.
burnout is hard because it's
Yeah.
there's not the same. There's almost like, it feels like at the moment there's not really a suggestion of how to overcome burnout, because to overcome burnout you need to be somebody that has the money to be able to stop working for a bit, or to make changes. So it's really tricky.
Yeah. Even going to therapy, if you think about it, is a luxury, like it costs money. A lot of
Oh yeah.
times, health insurance doesn't cover that. So people have to pay out of pocket to go to therapy, And while, some of us are privileged enough to like be able to go to therapy, you cannot think, or assume everybody's doing it, There's
Mm.
somebody right now that is right now working 2 3 jobs, and absolutely, feels it's daunting to get up and go to work, but he or she has to because there's so many responsibilities, and then they just have to, like, whatever, sometimes grandparents say, you just gotta, what's the phrase, like, you gotta buck up, like you gotta deal with
Mhm.
it, like I did in my times, like pay your dues like I did, which, I think it's a little, I mean, I understand from their perspective, but also I wonder what it would be for them if they had to relive their lives in this time, this era. It's a bit mean to say, like, to somebody, like, oh, try to do this, do that, because in their position, like, sometimes you're just so tired that you don't even want to think about, like,
Mhm.
what is, you just simply want to rest, sleep, eat, and forget about your problems, so it's kind of like your body
For
turns into a
sure.
machine. And so, I think even going to therapy, it's like I can see people saying, like, I don't go to therapy, I cannot afford that, I barely have time,
Mhm.
and money for my lunch, so yeah, we have,
Yeah,
I
a
think
hundred
it's this
percent.
topic is so important, it has so many things, like so many factors to it.
And again, it's really interesting that we're at completely different sides of the world and we're both,
Mm-hmm.
experiencing and seeing all of these things happening. Like in the UK, our political government situation is very, let's say, up and down. I think that's putting it very politely. And it's very scary, like living in the UK right now for a lot of people. There's a huge cost of living crisis. And you're so right. Like I
Mm.
just got off the phone from therapy. It was a very expensive therapist that I go to, who I, every single time I have to pay her, feel really, like, so many things. I feel really grateful that I can do that. I feel really annoyed that it's that much money because I can't really afford to do that forever. And also know that there's some people that could never even think about
Mm-hmm.
affording that. And everyone always says,
Yeah.
talk to somebody. That's how you get better for mental health problems. You talk to somebody. But, same here. We have the NHS in the UK, which we're so lucky to have. We have free healthcare for everything except mental health. I mean, there are free services here, but they're not as good. They're not as good as therapy that you pay for, and that's just the plain fact. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, overwhelm
Yeah.
and burnout. It's something almost unavoidable. It's just like, how do we find ways within ourselves to cope with it?
True. I love what you said about, like, health insurance, or like in this case, you obviously a lot of things are covered but not mental health, and that's something else also I was wondering, what would happen if all nations actually put mental health as a priority instead of like
Mm-hmm.
worrying about other things, that would be so big because, imagine people actually being in a great mental state, like, I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things could be avoided too, I think it would make
Mm-hmm.
people more, even more kind or humane, I don't know how to put it, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure everybody at some point had a moment where they actually had to talk about it, like, and sometimes, yes,
Yeah,
talking to your friends helps, but sometimes you do need that professional point of view to help you see things, to help you, um thing that you're experiencing, so I think it's mental health is so important that I think there
for
should be
sure.
resources, like a planned parenthood but for the mind, and mostly that is able to service a lot of, people that are in underprivileged conditions, because
Yeah.
if you talk to, I live in a third world country, so sometimes if I think about it, I'm like, if I were to mention to this person or talk to him or her about mental health, they would probably laugh at me, because they would say, something like,
Mm,
I have other things to worry about. Like, what is mental health? Well, like, laugh about it, because it's like it's not a
100%.
priority, and that's in the mind of a lot of people, and I think it's really important to help people, because otherwise, if somebody is burnout, for example, they actually reach their limits. I think it was last year. I can't remember exactly. I can't pinpoint when it was, but I think it was between last year and the year before. They were doing a lot of coverage about how Japanese workers were like completely burnt out, to the point that
Mm,
some of them were like passing out on train stations, or like sleeping in the street, or like even
mm,
I think one of them committed suicide. I think it was like a, and media was covering. I wish I could look for those articles, but I was like, I remember reading and being like, wow, how terrible it must be to
yeah.
feel that way. And well, turns out I'm not too far from it. Like, I was also experiencing
Mm,
burnout, but not to the point where you actually are passing out. And I imagine, like, in some other cultures too, working hard is the norm, like pushing yourself, like,
yeah.
come on, you have to keep doing, you have to keep going, and I think it's a bit irresponsible from companies as well to not see, how much pressure they're putting on their employees, and like how that could be leading to something worse. It should be also part of like the social responsibility of a company, just like
Mm,
corporations have to pay for like pollution and this and that. I think if they were to take care of their like employers or employees mental health, I think the company could even go do better, so it's like,
100%.
it's so, to me, it's like a bizarre topic to think about.
Oh, 100%. You're so right. Like, everything you've just said, I'm like, yeah, like, that's exactly it. And, there's been so many studies done about burnout that show that branches and
Yeah,
companies and stuff can be more profitable if they look after their employees' mental health. And I also saw a meme the other day that was like
yeah.
workers asking for better mental health things in their workplace. And they were like, well, we could do 4-day work weeks. We could do these things. We could work less hours, but like come in more or whatever. And then being like, no, we meant yoga. Like, we don't actually want to change anything in the system because that just
Yeah, I
doesn't,
think I saw it.
yeah, these systems have been in place for so long that people think we can't change them. Actually, trust me, if your employees are happier, they're going to work so much harder for you. And that's just common
Right. Yeah.
sense.
Aren't they testing that, the 4-day work week or something? Like, I saw it somewhere that
Hmm.
they're testing in some country. I don't know even where, but it's like four
I think it was
days
the
of
UK.
hard work. All right, cool. And then they're like 3 days off.
Yeah, but it's also
I think it
like,
was like that.
I've not seen, I don't know anyone that company's actually taking that on. Um, and there's my partner works for like a big kind of corporate job here, and he said, yeah, you can do 4-day
Hmm.
work weeks if you want, but you still lose some hours, you still get less money, and they really, really don't want you to do it. So it's kind of like
No.
it's something that the government has come up with, saying this could be useful, but then companies don't actually want to do it because they think it's not going to be good for them. Um, I also think here it's probably important to talk about like some people cannot work. Some people cannot work. I, for
Mm.
years and years, could not work in any capacity because of my mental health. And I had to rely
Mm.
on government money, which when I phoned them to talk to them about
Hmm.
it, they said, you don't sound agoraphobic. And I said, what does an agoraphobic person sound like?
Sound like.
um, It's crazy.
Oh my
I
god.
think, people think that people that don't work for mental health reasons are scroungers, or people that, they could just get a job, and no, some people cannot work.
It's a bit tone deaf, to be honest. Like, okay, if you get into an accident and you break your leg, they'll consider it, right? But if you're saying, I mentally am not I really don't want to be at work right now. I can't, some people even take breaks and go to the bathroom and cry. I have a friend who used to do that, um because she couldn't deal with it. She couldn't deal with like the pressure of her boss and everything. So, and at point, I remember this was a long time ago. We used to laugh, but then I realized how stupid that was, and then I apologized, and I told my friends like that's actually like a red flag right there, that she's doing that. Like, if she's doing that at work, what is she doing at home?
Yeah.
That has to be depressing for her. So we all helped her. But what I was saying is, we care about the physical things we can see. I don't know, but when it comes to the mind, even the government will gaslight you into being like,
Oh yeah.
but that's not a tangible illness. What do you mean? You're like sad? Don't be sad anymore, kind of
Yeah.
thing. But then they don't acknowledge that there are so many conditions out there. And it's interesting what you mentioned, because I was going to ask you, yeah, what is the response that you usually get when you have to like seek any type of
Mm.
help from the government? Like, is that usually the response you hear, or has it gotten better, or are
Oh
they
yeah.
acknowledging
Like
conditions like that?
it. So it's very, very different than if you were physically unwell. If you're mentally unwell, it's
Hmm.
definitely, they find it very skeptical. Um, Luckily, I'm somebody that was able to advocate for myself at that time. If I wasn't, then I wouldn't have been able to function or live because I wouldn't have had money. Um,
Hmm.
you have to get doctor's notes and things like that. So they make it as complicated as it possibly could be. I also have helped people in the past. When I used to work in a bar, I would help some customers write certain forms for their universal credit, which is the kind of money you get from the government here. And some people that we were helping do that weren't able to read and write as well as they it wasn't something they were able to do, but they were still expecting these
Mm.
people to write forms and all these kinds of things, like, and these people were not mentally able to work. And I think that is like the bottom line. That's the problem, is society, wherever you live in the world, have this one size fits all thing of everybody should fit into
Hmm.
this category of being able to work 5 days a week no matter what. And humans are unbelievably different, and so not everybody can fit into the mold that they want people to fit into. And this is mental
Oh,
health
for
related. This
sure.
is all about mental health. This can make or break people, I think.
Oh, for sure. I think it's so silly that somehow we have found or created things, rules, laws, that, or like policies, like that somehow will represent everybody, right? Will be right for everybody. But then we are different. Every single person is different, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like they should learn how to, and they should train people to how to deal with people with mental conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it's so cool that you guys have that, because you know I don't know if that exists in the US, but here in Latin America, that's something that you would say, what is that? Like, that's so
Mm.
cool. I wish I could have that. But here, you work or you starve, basically. I think that has humbled me a lot when I travel to other countries, because being in South America is like, I was telling this to a friend that visited from Germany not too long ago, and she told me, I can see how three classes, or even three types of classes, will be all together in the same space. And yeah, I could like go out and take you to or you could go to a main area where you could see people shopping, that clearly they're like upper class, they're well
Mm.
off, they have money. And then you'll see like middle class regular people, and then maybe in the corner you'll see like a mom with a child with no shoes begging for money. It's like, it's so crazy
Mm.
to me now that that I have traveled, and like I come back every now and then to Peru and see how all of us are like intertwined, and we're just like living in the same reality, but then in our heads everybody's kind of in their
Yeah.
own world, in their own capacity. It's like so crazy
Yeah.
to me.
100. Yeah, I totally know what
Yeah,
you
like
mean.
that's so nuts.
It is. And also so sad to hear that, if there was somebody, can I ask you, if there was somebody that had like a physical disability, would they be able to get help, like financially?
I don't think so, to be honest. I know that private insurances, insurance companies will sell you insurance. So let's say that tomorrow I get into an accident and if I have this insurance, they'll like pay back whatever is worth in their criteria, a monthly or bi-weekly or some, whatever the policy is, and they'll give me like some type of money. But I don't think we have that as a, as something universal for all. And it sucks because our main problem in Peru is corruption. The government's so corrupted
Mm,
that the entire body needs to disappear, There are so many things that are wrong.
yeah.
And it has, every country is rich if you think about it. Even the poorest country
Mm,
produces something, or at
yeah.
least the majority, not all, but at least the majority, But somehow people in the same country are poor, And I think the problem with countries that are, poor, it's because there's just corruption. Like
Yeah.
Venezuela has oil, but somehow their inflation is over the roof. They have a person that is not suitable in charge, so it's like countries like that have money, but it's corruption, so unless we get rid of people that are just like completely corrupted or that have no vision for their countries, that's never going to change, And I wish, Peru
Hmm.
has so much to offer, and I wish there were so many programs to help people, because also mental health here, I notice, is starting to be a big problem, and so it was cool to hear, I don't know if in the US they have that, but it's cool to hear that you guys at least have that, that type of coverage. I mean, it doesn't cover all, but at least it helps you if you're not working or you're unable to work.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Definitely. Definitely. Like and that like has, you know, made me realize like it's a really scary point at the moment, basically in the UK and all over the world. It sounds like that there is a cost of living crisis. There's a lot of things happening right now that are really scary. And, you know, like we said, you're quite privileged if you're able to, it's not the norm to kind of be able to look after your mental health all the time, and in this story the
Mm-hmm.
girl was saying, I feel myself starting to feel burnt out, and that's when I know, okay, it's time to do something about this. And I don't want this podcast to be
Mm-hmm.
all doom and gloom, because of course there are things that you can do, each individual one of us can do to help ourselves. We know
Yeah.
ourselves better than we know anybody else, and better than anyone else knows us. I know for a fact every single time I have a bath, I will feel better after a bath. Obviously, that's not going to fix my burnout. Obviously, it's not going to help my financial situation. But I know that little things like this do make a tiny bit of difference, and those things do add up. And that sounds really cheesy, maybe, or really like living in a bubble. But I do believe that we do know ourselves really well, and we know when it's time to stop, make a change. Um, and there is definitely
Mm-hmm.
hope.
Yeah. I think that takes me back to like knowing what when your body talks to you. If you're in a position where you are able to like slow down, then do it, that's good. And also there are some people out there that know, that have experienced it, and also are able to help others, in like small things that they can help with. So I think it's also important to like, if you're not able to help in a tangible way, then at least, help
Mhm.
some other people that are, maybe not recognizing that what they have is burnout or even like anxiety, because
Yes.
it kind of is connected, at least the way I see it. Something bad happens and it's almost like it takes me back to zero. It's like, that's why they say that depression, anxiety, it's like constant work, kind of like when you're
Yeah.
an alcoholic, or you have to be mindful about everything you do, so that you don't fall into the trap of like doing drugs and stuff like that, you know. It kind of like something will happen, and depending on the degree, I'll be able to tolerate it or like deal with it. But if it's like too much, it's just incredibly hard to deal with, it'll take me back. And then I'll be like anxious, you know, and then I'll start having panic attacks. And maybe because I'm very, you know, sad that all of that's happening, then I'm starting to be depressed. You know, it's kind of like a domino effect, you know. It's important to identify when you're feeling it and kind of like tackle that issue right there, you know.
100%. And there are ways to do that are accessible for everybody, I think. And hopefully this podcast can be one of those places where you feel like you can at least be understood or heard. It's really important to us that that's, you know, the feeling that people are getting. And if you would like to send in a story that you have about burnout or about anxiety, we'd really love to hear it. Or you can come and chat to us on the podcast. Like we said, we don't want this to be a doom and gloom podcast, but we also want to be honest and share our opinions. Of course, these are just our opinions. It's not fact. Thanks, everybody, for listening today.
See you soon.
Bye, everybody.